What's going on, guys? K-Pine here and welcome back. And in this video, I'll be featuring a strong team that includes some meta titans of the season. Swalot Lead, Credilli Safe Swap, and Azumarill Closer. Both Swalot and Azu form a very strong core with each other, covering for those grass and ground weaknesses. Credilli on the Safe Swap is just an extremely versatile Pokemon with that Rock Tomb debuff spam. Plus, with this team comp, it helps to bait out that opposing grass type your opponent may have. And with that, let's get right into the battles. Alright, getting to the first battle, we'll lead Swalot into the meta staple of Shadow Drapion. This is a good matchup for the Swalot as we are hitting for super effective with those mud shots while they're hitting for resisted in return with the poison stings. Now, the only matchup the Shadow Drapion does win against the Swalot is the ones. So just don't play the ones in this scenario and you're good. So I will go for the Ice Beam here. That does get shielded. And since they did not get a debuff on that first crunch, I can let this second move go, survive it, and get off yet another Ice Beam, which is huge. If they do get a debuff there, that's kind of unfortunate, as you will then have to go down shields to get rid of the Shadow Drapion, because you don't want your Swalot to go down. You bring in your Azu, and then they pivot out and save that Drapion for later, so now it's on the Credilli. The only situation where it's fine is if they don't get that crunch debuff like here, where they're down and have 0 shields now, because Credilli can handle a 0 shield Shadow Drapion. Now my opponent swaps into a Dusknoir. We are able to hang on with that Shadow Punch, land that Play Rough, and now we are going to be able to get the entire bubble down before they are able to astonish us down. So we will give up our shield there, leave 1 off the Play Rough, which if they bring in that Shadow Drapion, I will go for the Ice Beam since this will just be about enough to KO. It is, and they have a Diggersby in the back. We bring in our Credilli and they concede. GG's. Next battle, we lead Swalot into Guzzlord. A little bit of a tricky lead here, as Swalot does win the 0 shield scenario, but it loses the 2s. And as for the 1s, you win the 1s if you're able to get a sludge bait. So it's up to you whether or not you want to full send the Ice Beam right off the bat like I do, unfortunately get shielded, or if you want a sludge bait. And now if your Ice Beam does get shielded, you unfortunately will no longer be able to win the 1s, because you can make it to yet another Ice Beam, but you won't be able to make it to an Ice Beam plus a sludge. So that's why the bait is needed, because you can reach 2 sludges and an Ice Beam, but you can't reach 2 Ice Beams and a sludge. So my opponent does actually end up going down both shields when they would have won the 1 shield scenario there anyways, which is fantastic because I can bring my Azu into the Guzz. They pivot out into their own Azu. I can beat it with the Credilli. And here I'm thinking that a Rock Tomb plus a Grass Knot might not be enough to take out the Azu. So I'm just going to go for double Grass Knots here, because like the extra bubble damage, so what? It's probably not going to matter too much in the grand scheme of things for this matchup. Second Grass Knot does KO the Azu. See what my opponent wants to do. They're probably going to come back in with that Guzzlord, but they don't. They come in with the Jump Bluff, and now that's probably just going to be game at this point, because I get to land this Rock Tomb to debuff them, where I'll now be able to survive in acrobatics. But instead they just overfarm a ton, catch the Rock Tomb onto their own Guzzlord. That's perfectly fine because I land that debuff move again, Credilli just spamming off the debuffing move. We're able to tank that crunch, and then as long as we store that Rock Tomb back, we do win CMP over the Jump Bluff, so there is nothing left that they can do. Do catch the Dragon Claw onto my Azu. We would just go for the bubble down there, of which case my opponent realizes the match is over, so they concede. GG's. Let's battle Swalot into Guzzlord. So a little bit of a redemption here. If we're going to decide to full send the Ice Beam or bait the sludge, always make sure you're throwing after 7 or 10 mud shots in this situation for good timing. If your opponent lets you throw first, that is. So they're at overfarm, and now I'm going to full send the Ice Beam again. Ice Beam coming through, and it does get shielded. So it's like, it's a little bit tricky, because you want to full send the Ice Beam since it's Guzzlord, but also if they shield it, you know, what are you going to do? And there, I don't quite reach the second Ice Beam since I do let both of my opponent's moves go. I'm unfortunately not lucky enough to get DRE, but that is okay. Bringing Azu into the Guzzlord. They are running the Sludge Bomb, does some nice damage onto my Azu, and from here, this is just about Ice Beam range. So I can go for the Ice Beam instead of the Play Rough to take it out, which my opponent lets the Guzz go. And that is very nice because if they're running a Guzzlord Lead, that is potentially their only answer to a Greedilly. So with the Guzz out of the way, Greedilly might just flourish here. Where you see they do have the Gastrodon and Amanda Buzz, and Greedilly is just going to run away with this game. Land 1 Rock Tomb. 2 Rock Tombs aren't quite enough to take out the Mana Buzz, so we will need to go for 3. So that is no worries at all. We showed up the Dark Pulse, make the correct call, go for another Rock Tomb right away. 1, 2, 3, 4 Rock Tomb, 1, 2, 3, 4 Rock Tomb. That's kind of the name of the game for Greedilly. Land that second Rock Tomb. And here I'm going to let their move go and then play to the CMP tie to their next Dark Pulse. But my opponent just ends up swapping out into the Gastrodon. Makes it a little bit easier for me as I can Rock Tomb. Like, just Rock Tombing the Gastrodon there. It's kind of crazy. Because, you know, they're forced to shield. And then even if they let that Rock Tomb go, you're still going to win the game. Pokemon's kind of crazy. But we do reach the Grass Knot, take it out, of which my opponent then finally decides to concede. GG's. Next battle. Swallow into Forretress. A little bit of a tricky lead. Our whole team is kind of pretty weak to this thing, but Swallow is able to do decent enough to it since an Earthquake does not one-shot, so they're most likely going to go for a Tomb and then a Quake of some sorts, or maybe double Quake, who's really sure. We do land that Ice Beam, and these Mud Shots are kind of our saving grace in this matchup, where it's kind of the only way we're able to get damage off of it. But since they go for that Rock Tomb, we're not really able to get as much damage as we were anymore. So they're going to go for another move. This is probably another Rock Tomb, which it is. Let it go. I'm able to hang on and make a third parting Ice Beam here. And then once my Swallow goes down, I will bring in my Greedilly. Actually, they're a little bit low enough where I decided, you know, I don't need to throw a Rock Tomb at this to take it out. I can just tank moves on my Azu and just bubble it all the way down, and then I can get rid of the Forretress. Then hopefully with the Forretress gone, my Azu and Greedilly backclouds can be able to do pretty well here. So I do tank 2 Rock Tombs there. Now I'm going to pivot into the Greedilly to get rid of the debuff, but it's a Guzzlord in the back, and this is looking really tough here. So they did have a strong answer to the Greedilly in the lead as well as in the back. As we do land that Rock Tomb, they're going to fire off the Crunch in return, which I will shield. As at this point, since I know that they have the Jellicent in the back, I need to keep my Greedilly around. I need to keep it healthy because that's pretty much my only answer to that Jellicent at that point. Because I have no fast move pressure with the bubbles from the Azus, and the Play Roughs don't really do enough combined with the resistant bubbles to take it out. So give up yet another shield. Go for this next Rock Tomb. Guzz is able to just hang on, and I'll switch into the Azu, trying to get a little bit of an extra bubble energy lead on it, but they pivot into Jelly, and with them doing that, yeah, this game's over. They can just CMP tie me here, take me out with the Shadow Ball. Down goes Azu, and at that point, I do end up conceding. GG's. Next battle, we lead Swallow into Dunsparce. A little bit of a tricky lead here. I don't want to swap out right away because, you know, my opponent could just throw and then get a drill run off against my Greedilly will deny me. And I stay in here at first to test it because I was thinking that with the rollout nerf and Swallow is really thick, it's really tanky, that I was hoping I would be able to survive the rollouts and 2 drill runs. And from seeing that damage, I can't. So in reality, the better play for me to do there is just throw a single Mud Shot and then swap into my Greedilly. That way, when my opponent throws a move, I'm still getting those 4 Bullet Seeds worth of damage and energy through, but now I also have an extra Mud Shot on my Swallow that I wouldn't have otherwise. They come in with a normal Drapion, go for the crunch, I will shield it because, again, Cradily is just going to drop their attack. Rock Tomb does land. Going for Rock Tomb number 2. And especially with these double debuffs, Crunch isn't going to be able to KO from there. So what I do instead is I decide to save my Cradily, hoping it would be even more useful later on instead of just sacking it against that Drapion. So I hard pivot to my Azu, knowing they're double debuffed. They're on Crunch, Aqua Tail, and that we just get to tank that double debuffed energy there, and it basically gets to go nowhere. Now they bring in a Wigglytuff. I land that play rough. I'm not quite in swift range, so I'm hoping I can hang on and store this energy and get out, but I can't get out, so I'm forced to throw. We under tap the Ice Beam. It does just not KO the Wigglytuff as we get another Mud Shot on the Swalot. In comes the Dunsparce, and there I make a little bit of a mistake. I thought they were farther away from the move than it seemed, than they were, so I should have thrown my Sludge right away instead of over farming, so I wouldn't have to give up that shield, because in doing so that allows them to then pivot out and combo play with the Drapion. So a little bit of a tricky end game there, but fortunately that normal Drapion is never poison stinging down the Swalot. So I land the Sludge, take it out, pivot into my Cradily. They do reach a drill run, but Cradily is thick, hangs on, and the ensuing rollout. So despite that little bit of a misplay there by losing track of the Dunsparce energy earlier, Cradily coming in clutch, able to hang on with 1 HP and take that game for us. GG's. Next battle, Swalot into Carbink. Pretty neutral lead. We are hitting for super effective with the Mud Shots, but they're non-stab Mud Shots, and Carbink is really, really bulky. So it's pretty much more neutral than anything. They pivot into a Sableye, and this is a regular Sableye. It's not a Shadow. Now, the good thing about a regular Sableye is that Azu can comfortably tank the Dazzling Gleam, Power Gem, whatever it is they're running, and single-handedly win all even shield scenarios. And that's what makes the Shadow Sableye a little bit more tricky. If you counter swap Azu into it and you let the Dazzling Gleam or the Power Gem go through, Shadow Sableye can now take the 2 shield. Of which, if that's the case, it is a Shadow. What I would do is I would just force the 2-0 shields from them if you can, or even the 2-1 at that point if they do end up going for the double nukes, and utilizing energy on your Swalot or Cradily afterwards. Now they come in with a Trevenant. On this Pokemon is a blast from the past, seeing it there. It kind of fell out of rotation with the Seed Bomb change, making its pacing a lot worse to its bait move. But with the Foul Play rework, it now has the same 7 pacing to Shadow Balls and 5 to Foul Plays that it had when Trevenant was meta previously, being the 5 to Seed Bombs and 7 to Shadow Balls. Where now it's the 665. So when my opponent threw that Seed Bomb against me earlier in the match, I was a little bit confused. I was like, Seed Bomb, I was expecting them to be Foul Play and Shadow Ball, but you see them throw the Foul Play there. They're actually Foul Play and Seed Bomb, which is very, very interesting. But we do have the alignment we want. We bring in the Cradily and my opponent concedes. GG's. Next battle, Swalot into Dewgong. Not a great lead for us, so we are going to pivot into our Cradily right away, since if we do pivot right away, we will be able to outpace this Rock Tomb before they reach an Icy Wind, which essentially means that that 1 turn it took for us to swap is null and void, does not matter anymore. Now, surprisingly, instead of coming in their Superior right away, they tank that move onto their Dewgong and then bring in their Superior. I guess in a sense that Superior down an entire Bullet Seed to a Cradily does actually kind of struggle a bit in the 2s. So that does make a little bit more sense. Now I think about it, being able to get some Ice Shard chip damage off and then to bring in your Serp. But here, because of that heavily misaligned switch timer, I'm able to debuff that Serp twice, swap back into my Swalot, tank that Aerial Ace, which is nothing, and now I have a massive energy lead, which makes this matchup a lot better, especially since I landed a Rock Tomb onto that Dewgong earlier. So I'm going to go for Sludge 1. We are debuffed, but these 2 Sludges will be enough to KO the Dewgong, unless they decide to give up a shield, which they do. They give up their first shield. That's perfectly fine because I can throw 1 and then catch the move on my Cradilly. Drill Run, they do undercharge to get an extra Ice Shard, but it's not going to matter. That Dewgong is as good as gone. And with a Jumpluff in the back, this matchup is as good as ours. As I can land the Ice Beam, it does land. And from here, I can just leave it to Azu to close out, since with 2 shields, I will be able to reach 2 Ice Beams. But my opponent baits with an Aerial Ace instead of an Acrobatics, and if it wasn't already over, it definitely is now. As we reach the Sludge, KOs the Jumpluff, in comes the Serp, but it's just too low. We will be able to bubble down, of which my opponent does realize, so they can see. GG's. Next battle, Swalot into Annihilape. Interesting lead. They are hitting for resisted with the counters, but those Rage Fists, especially over time, do add up. And we are hitting for neutral with the Mud Shot and Ice Beams in return. But again, none of those moves are stab. So it makes the matchup a little bit more uncomfortable than you think it would be. But I guess that's just the nature of an opposing Annihilape. Always, the matchup is always uncomfortable. My opponent does shield that first Ice Beam, which is nice because I know I can survive that next Rage Fist and still make another. Of which here at this point, if they do shield this up, I'm just let my Swalot go down. Or if they let it go, I'm going to let my Swalot go down and bring in an Azu so we can tank whatever they have. They can go for a close combat Rage Fist. It does not matter, but my opponent makes a very, very smart play here. They save their Annihilape and that energy for later by pivoting into Lapras. So, you know, I'm kind of forced to bring in my Cradilly here because otherwise Lapras is just going to take care of Azu and my Cradilly is left on to a Annihilape and that's game over. But also by pivoting here, if their third answer is a strong Azu answer, which it most likely is, the game's going to be over anyways. So my opponent, by not staying in that matchup, they did a very, very good job managing that ape. We go for the Rock Tomb there. Not quite able to leave with a move stored, which is unfortunate. So I'm going to pivot into my Azu and hope the third Pokemon is something that Azu has to play into, but it's a Galarian Weezing, and Azu definitely does not have play into this. I mean, if they're not on Sludge, then Azu does, but if they are on Sludge, which basically every single Weezing is, this game is over. So I see they're on Sludge. Playing it out just a little bit more, trying to see if I can think of any potential win con here, of which I'm thinking, you know, if they let this go and I can get rid of the Weezing, maybe, but they shield it. Not able to reach that move on my Cradilly to get rid of the Weezing. And at that point, the match is over when my opponent here does reach the Rage Fist and takes out Azu. GG's. Next battle, Swalot into Wigglytuff. Dream Lead. This is fantastic for us. See what my opponent wants to pivot into. They pivot into a Shadow Alolan Marowak, and I can answer it with Azu. And now here, if you're going for those bubbles and ice beams, just due to the slow pacing and the oppressiveness of Mud Slap and Mud Bomb, Shadow Kanto Marowak can make the twos very, very tricky here. Especially if you let the first one go, then your opponent can just double shield and take switch. Of which in that case, I'm kind of fine doing because it's a Wigglytuff and I'm like, okay, cool, they get it off the Swalot, but with a 2 shield advantage, Cradilly is just going to sweep this game. There's absolutely nothing they can do. So like here, I can shield this up and get a full Bullet Seed down before they reach a second. Or they actually do reach a second, but either way, that's perfectly fine because I'll give both my shields back. They're going to bring in that Wigglytuff. And again, nothing it can do, especially with this energy lead. I'm going to be able to throw this Rock Tomb here, which does just about half. So the ensuing Bullet Seeds plus the next Rock Tomb should just about take it out. Maybe not quite because I didn't get extra Bullet Seeds in the beginning. So I'm going to go for the Grass Knot to ensure they KO after one more Bullet Seed. And it's a Claydol. So yeah, this matchup is over. I can land a Grass Knot, get some nice hefty damage on to the Claydol. Now I can pivot my own Swalot, where the Mud Slaps plus a Scorching Sands don't quite KO us. We will be able to reach an Icy Wind in time, which you see, or an Ice Beam in time, which you see here. And my opponent realizes it, so they do top left and concede. GG's. Now heading into the final battle of the video, we lead Swalot into Shadow Drapion. We've seen this lead before. We know how it plays out. We're hoping for no crunch debuff here. And now, I'll admit I did lie to you guys a little bit earlier, where I said the only shield scenario Shadow Drapion beats Swalot in is the ones, so just play out the ones, don't play out the ones. That's not entirely true, because if you do have a high-ranked Swalot, you will be able to survive the stings and crunches and tails enough to win the ones. But like I said, you need a really high-ranked Swalot. So you see there, my opponent just goes for an Aqua Tail, so that's fine, I can let it go. And because they go for that Aqua Tail and that Aqua Tail lands, I will be able to win the ones. It's if they land 2 crunches in the ones where they have the chance to win, depending on your Swalot IVs. So I do land that Ice Beam. They come in with their own Azu, throw 1 Mud Shot and then the Sludge for good timing. Sludge lands on the Azu for some nice damage. I'm going to pivot into Credilli. And then with that Shadow Drapion out of the way and the fact that they're staying in with their Azu, we're in a pretty good spot here, as I do get the Rock Tomb bait correct, which I can let this Ice Beam go. I don't know what their third Pokemon is yet, and I was hoping that by letting that Ice Beam go, that shield could better be used somewhere else, potentially, especially since it is debuffed, but it's their own Credilli. And yeah, no, we're good here. We shield up their Rock Tomb just in case they try and sneak through a cheeky little Grass Knot. But it is only the Rock Tomb, and with that, I overfarm into Swalot trying to catch, but being unsuccessful on the catch does not matter because they are forced to throw since they can't Bullet Seed down. Swalot's just too thick, so he can come in with Credilli, land this Rock Tomb. With that Rock Tomb landing, dropping down that attack, yeah, like there's really nothing my opponent can do at this point. Especially with that Grass Knot, look at that. It's just debuffed into oblivion at that point. Credilli was able to hang on, make it to yet another Rock Tomb into Azu. I just pivot my own, get to basically the back-to-back moves, and this game would be over, of which my opponent does realize, so they end up conceding. GG's. Now, besides this team being composed of some heavy meta hitters, it includes Swalot, which is just incredibly fun to use and really good, as evident through the back-to-back 4-1 sets that were featured in this video. So feel free to give the team a try yourself and let me know how it goes. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate you. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Love to hear what you have to say. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.